Michael Morell, yes. Oh, why is that right here? That's your name. And it says, yes, you have a contract with the CIA. So David Buckley also, yes, had a contract with the CIA. Shocking, because they told us that they didn't work for the CIA. Now, the pre-publication review board determined that the talking points contained classified information that had to be removed prior to publication. Wow. So the CIA's internal review board approved this? It's all
Looks
real.
like a classic Russian playbook disinformation campaign. That assessment, by the way, is not my assessment. That's the assessment of the Trump intelligence community leadership.
Some of those 51 so-called intelligence officials who signed that letter to rig the 2020 election, they admitted that's why they wrote it. Some of them were active CIA contractors. And that's curious because one of their main talking points every time we brought this up, that this is how the election was rigged, at least in one part, they tell us, well, they were independent people. They were free citizens. They were not actually employed by the CIA. And so you can't say that the CIA was responsible for any of this or that the government was involved in rigging the election. And of course, that's obviously ridiculous. We know that the CIA operates agents all the time, not necessarily employees who show up with a name tag and a badge and a desk. We've seen the CIA movies. We know how this works. They're contractors. If one person does something bad, they disavow that person and they get burned. So it's the same thing that's happening here. They use this talking point as though these 51 people had no connections with the CIA, even though they were all ex-CIA, ex-intelligence. Now we know that some of those co-signers were actually CIA contractors. And so the New York Post gives us some of the background on it. We're going to look at the actual report coming up because Congress put together a very nice brief and we're going to go through it. But here, some background from Washington. Some of the spies who lie were active CIA contractors, a fact that was uneasily noted inside the agency because they all told us like, no, we're retired like college professors. We have no connection to the agency. Former CIA acting director who already told Congress, this is Michael Morell, this guy right here. He literally says, I wrote it because I didn't like Trump. He said, I wanted to give Biden a talking point ahead of the debate against Trump. That guy was under contract with the CIA. No, he didn't work for the CIA is what they told us. He was independent. No, he was being paid by the CIA. He had a contract with them. Ex-agency Inspector General David Buckley was also a contractor at the time, according to another report. And records suggest that at least 2 other letter signers may have also had active contracts at the time. So they were working for the CIA. The terms of the contracts and the compensation were not immediately clear. Morell flatly denied he was a contractor when contacted. He said, if you write that, you would be wrong. Morell doubled down in a second email. He said, I can't speculate on why he was listed. They said, well, why were you listed by the CIA as being a contractor, huh? He says, I can't speculate on why I was listed there. He says, it's wrong. I was not. Yeah, right. A congressional source provided the Post with the CIA's documents outing Morell as a contractor after his denial, okay? So Morell, the guy who organized the whole thing, denies it. So on April 25th, here's the letter. The Honorable Michael Turner, the Honorable Jim Jordan, signed here by Deputy General for Litigation and Investigations, Robert Dugas, writing from the CIA, unclassified, that's what their letterhead looks like, says, okay, dear Chairman Turner and Chairman Jordan, CIA writes, I write to provide an unclassified document related to your letters about the CIA. You're asking about oversight about the public statement on the Hunter Biden emails signed by 51 former intelligence officials. Now, pursuant to a request, this 9th production contains a document showing whether each of the 5 individuals was under contract with the CIA directly or through a contracted company on October 19, 2020. Sincerely, Deputy General Counsel, the lawyer for litigation and investigations, Robert Dugas. Okay, so here are the people who used to work or were contracted. Was John Brennan contracted with the CIA directly or through a company on October 19, 2020? John Brennan? No. Mark Polymeropoulos? No. Nick Rasmussen? No. But Michael Morell? Yes. Oh, Oh, Michael Morell. Oh, no. How come that's on this document, Michael? Why is that right here? That's your name. And it says, yes, you have a contract with the CIA. Huh? That's very confusing. I don't know what it is. So David Buckley also, yes, had a contract with the CIA. Shocking, because they told us that they didn't work for the CIA. But they have contracts, unclassified, signed by the CIA. Oh, that sucks for them, because that makes them even bigger liars, which we already knew they were liars. We already knew they worked for the CIA. That's why they signed the letter. And every single left liberal loser who says, well, they're just totally independent citizens who just had concern about the Russians is now blown out of the water. So we're going to read through this full report because this came out from the U.S. House of Representatives. It's a full report, lots of more details on that, so we'll get there in a minute. But first, want to share this quick message with you from our friends at Ground News. Take a look at this story I found about Attorney General Merrick Garland's whining, calling legitimate criticism against his office attacks on the DOJ. And with all the misinformation out there today, you may have missed this one. I'm looking at this on Ground News, an awesome website and app that combines related news from all over the world and political spectrum into one place. You can check them out by going to ground.news/RGE or just click the link in the description below. Ground News has been an excellent tool for my everyday research when I'm prepping the show, and I think it will be for you too. Let me show you how it works. Here you can see over 10 sources are covering this story, and that more coverage is coming from the left and the center than on the right, which makes sense. We can also see the difference in the headlines, with outlets like CNN repeating Garland's claims while the right calls him out. But not all stories are equal. Using their blind spot feed helps you identify what the media is and isn't covering on either side of the political spectrum and helps you catch stories that you may be missing. Ground News is amazing because it helps you see what friends and family with opposing views are seeing, and with the upcoming 2024 elections, this will be very important. It's super easy to get set up. Just go to ground.news/RGE or click the link in the video description below. If you sign up through my link, you'll get 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use to get unlimited access to all their features. I think Ground News is doing important work, and I hope you'll check them out. Visit ground.news/RGE. Now we look at the House report that details what really went down with the 51 so-called intelligence officials who now we know are actually morons. This is the report from Congress, the intelligence community, how CIA contractors colluded, and they're contractors, with the Biden campaign to mislead American voters. They rigged the election. The CIA and Joe Biden rigged it. Anthony Blinken, who's now the Secretary of State, met with Michael Morell. They created talking points, and they were working for the CIA. So here's the summary. The Committee on the Judiciary, its selective subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government, and the permanent select subcommittee have all revealed how 51 former idiots coordinated with the Biden campaign to discredit the Biden family influence peddling schemes. They issued a public statements, and they sought to cast doubt on the New York Post story. They literally called it Russian disinformation. It feels like a bad movie. We rewind back there, and there was a huge portion of this country that was out there saying it was Russian disinformation. You're crazy. And then they censored the news. So President Biden even cited to the statement in a televised debate. He held it up. Now, we now know that the former 51 intelligence officials weren't actually former. I mean, they were actually working. They were contracted there, so I'd get rid of that. I mean, some of them were actual still officials. Maybe not officially with the government, but they were contractors. So I don't know that they're former. Was a blatant political operation from the start. It originated with a call from a top Biden campaign official, Anthony Blinken, and that went to former Deputy CIA Director Michael Morell. Those two colluded, no charges for them. The committee investigation revealed that without this outreach from Blinken, so Biden reached out to the CIA, Morell wouldn't have done it. Morell told the committees that Blinken triggered his intent to write the statement, his words. The statement drafters were open about the goal. We think Trump will attack Biden on the Hunter laptop, and so he said, this is what Morell said, we want to give the vice president a talking point to use in response. The CIA created fake news. They actually manufactured misinformation. Michael Morell, a CIA contractor, used to direct the place, so it's about as close as you can get without being the actual director, created disinformation, blamed the Russians, which is freaking insane to blame another power for trying to interfere with your election, to say, wait, okay, so they're trying to elect Trump? Like, we should go to war with them for that. So the details as revealed by the committees to date are concerning enough, but as the committees have continued to investigate, new information has come to light. Now, through newly newly obtained internal CIA emails and testimonial evidence, the committees have uncovered more information on the extent to which the intelligence community was involved in the statement. Specifically, here's what the evidence shows. High-ranking CIA officials up to and including then CIA Director Gina Haspel were made aware of the Hunter Biden statement prior to its approval and publication. So she knew that they were writing this, that all of this was being spread around. They probably left it next to the donuts, you know, by the coffee. Hey, you want a donut? Hey, sign this letter for us. Now, because several former senior intelligence officials signed the statement, the PCRB sent the draft statement to her COO at the CIA, who then subsequently told her that the statement would be published. Hey, CIA Director, you run this whole organization. You know that there's going to be a letter that's going to be published by 51 so-called ex-intelligence officials, and it's going to be kind of attributed to the CIA. You down with that? No comment. Senior CIA leadership had an opportunity at that time to slow down the process to make sure it was vetted. Didn't care. Some of the statement's signatories, including Michael Morrell, were on active contract with the CIA at the time. Now, throughout the course of the committee, the signatories, all 51, claimed to not have had access to any classified information about any of this when they said it had all the hallmarks of Russian disinfo. Yeah, right. However, at the time of the statement's publication, at least two signatories, Morrell and Inspector General, who should know better, David Buckley, they were on the CIA's payroll as contractors. And due to purported operational concerns, the CIA declined to declassify the entire universe of signatories who were on active contract. So there may be others who were on contract but just undercover. They were the agents that are classified. Like, these are unclassified. You get to know about these guys. In addition, some signatories to the Hunter Biden statement also had special, quote, green card access to the CIA at the time of the statement's publications, allowing them to gain entry to secure CIA facilities. So they were working for the CIA and at the CIA when they were signing these letters, and the CIA director who was in charge of the CIA knew about it and allowed it to go forward. After publication of the Hunter statement, the CIA employees expressed concern that it was politicized. They said, you know, this is not helpful to the agency in the long run. So some people wake up over there. At least one employee found it to be interesting to see what was submitted and approved when discussing media talking points. When discussing Polymeropoulos and his talking points, another CIA official stated, quote, it appears that Polymeropoulos is actively involved in a pro-Biden campaign, maybe disclosing classified information about our efforts. Now, the pre-publication review board determined that the talking points contained classified information that had to be removed prior to publication. Wow! So the CIA's internal review board approved this? So the CIA officially approved the letter? Let's see. The new information included this report shows the potential dangers here. In the waning days before the election, 51 intelligence officials rushed to draft the statement because they claimed they had specialized knowledge. The statement was conceived following a conversation with Blinken to Morrell. Some of the signatories were on the CIA payroll at the time. Others were working at CIA facilities. Even Morrell, before the committee learned of this contract, acknowledged. He said it's inappropriate for a currently serving staff officer or a contractor to be involved in the political process. He forgot about his contract, I guess. The infamous Hunter Biden statement had all the hallmarks of an intelligence community influence operation. Well done. That is a quote, essentially, from their letter. The Hunter Biden laptop has all the hallmarks of a Russian influence operation. They took their line and they just rephrased it. But rather than carrying it out against our adversaries on foreign soil, this operation was directed at the American people and our democratic processes. It's impossible to know for certain how events would have played out differently if these 51 liars never sought to rig the election. All the committee may do is now present the facts and hope that we can do something about this. So let's go through some of the highlights of it. It says the CIA at the highest levels was aware of this statement prior to its publication. The drafters of the public statement have long maintained the CIA had no part in the approval of the statement, beyond confirming the statement contained no classified info. But nope, not true. It says we know that the director of the CIA, Gina Haspel, and the deputy director, Von Frederick Bishop, were made aware. Their awareness came via the PCRB, which is the internal CIA office responsible for reviewing and clearing publications by intelligence community officials. Okay, so we now have three things. One, they were paid, so there was money. They got paid for it. They worked at the CIA, and they also basically approved it. Okay, so they confirmed confirmed that this was okay to be approved. So they worked at the CIA, like physically at the CIA. They made money and they approved it. That's the three ways that the CIA rigged the election. Now, although the PCRB routinely reviews a manuscript without elevating it, in this case, they did elevate it. They said, uh-oh, this is pretty big. They took it to the COO, and then the COO notified Morell that the PCRB approved it. So then Haspel, the CIA director, instituted a review process. She would have seen it. According to testimony from the COO, she instituted a policy requiring the PCRB to flag for her review all submissions for final approval. She did so after several officials wrote stuff that got some news coverage. She says, okay, look, I don't want this to happen again. So she made a rule change, and then they published this. So presumably, she hasn't answered questions on it, but presumably she went through the same approval process as in other submissions. So she saw it. Here is an email talking about a rush job. So here's an excerpt from a CIA email. This is what it looks like. From Michael Morell, the guy who was colluding with the Blinkens and Bidens, to someone else, copied Mark, public statement converted, doc and a PDF. Says, good morning. Hope everyone had a nice weekend. Attaches the statement that Mark and I drafted that many former senior and working level officials from across the IC will sign and then be made public. We are 100% confident it does not contain classified information. Indeed, it specifically says we don't know what the IC or the FBI knows about this. This is a rush job, says Michael Morell, as it needs to get out as soon as possible. Do you know why? Because we had a debate coming up, and Anthony Blinken needed Joe Biden to be able to say that. So they engineered an intelligence operation to rig the election, to persuade with disinfo the American people from knowing the truth. The PCRB staff acknowledged the receipt of the statement. They said, oh, we got it. Perfect. We know what's going on. They sent the statement to the COO. They said high importance. They received the notification. Then they gave the statement to the CIA director to flag it for their awareness. During an interview, question, Matt Creedis, the COO. Okay, so Mr. COO. So then after you determine that the article that you received was written by a former senior official, Michael Morell, a director, then you would alert either the director or deputy director. Is that right? Yeah. What did that process look like? Was that just, hey, heads up, this is coming? Was there a conversation? How did that typically look? So the typical process was, once I saw it and sort of saw that it was from a former senior, I would bring it to the attention of either the director or the deputy director. It would depend on the day who was available. And how did it work in this case with the statement? I don't recall exactly, but the process that I have just described is probably the way it worked. I would have stepped across the hall and said, here's an article. It's come up from the PCRB. They said there is no classification information in it, and it's going to run. And since this statement was being signed by Director Brennan, Director Clapper, Director Panetta, Director Morell, do you know if you flagged this for the awareness, since it's like everybody that you've ever known? They would have seen, if I provided them a copy, which is my normal process, they would have seen who the authors were. So they knew. Gina knew. They all knew. Oh crap, there's 5 other directors on there. I guess this statement's going out. So the Hunter Biden statement drew significant attention at the CIA senior staff level. Macreadis, as the COO, was the 3rd highest ranking official there with over 37 years. In his testimony before the committee, the COO stated that he had never seen a statement of this nature come across his desk before, obviously. Have you seen anything like the public statement in all of your years of experience like this? You mean with that many signatories of that caliber, who had held the prestigious positions within the intelligence community, especially the CIA, people you knew personally, anything like that? No, I had not seen anything of that nature, obviously. So despite acknowledging the extraordinary nature of the Hunter statement, none of the top 3 officials paused the statement's review process within the CIA or raised any concerns about how this might impact the agency's credibility. Of course not, because it was an operation. The CIA alerted the Office of the Director of National Intelligence about it as well, and they had no objections to the statement's release. So the government was signing off on it. CIA approved it, they paid for it, and they had an office where they could work. And then they just had their ex-CIA agents, so it's fine. So then here's another one. Request a quick turnaround. Here's another one. From an ODNI e-equity perspective, DNI Prepub has no objections to this release. However, we defer to you to provide the official clearance decision to the requesters. So please advise. So now the DNI is also signing off on this rigged letter. So CIA's in on it and the DNI is on it. On the same day that they cleared the Hunter statement, which alleged that stories about Hunter's laptop were hallmarks of Russian disinfo, then DNI John Ratcliffe issued a statement that the laptop story was not part of some Russian disinfo campaign, right? Trump is still in office. No, it's not. The intelligence community doesn't believe that because there is no intelligence that supports that at all. Notably, as the most senior intelligence community official, Ratcliffe would have been the most informed individual on this and the best equipped to make any judgments about it. So it's unclear why why they felt it was necessary to consult with the DNI regarding the statement. The COO of the CIA testified he had never reached out to his counterpart about the ODNI about a statement before, and he could not explain why they felt we needed this. Simultaneously, the COO also could not refute the possibility that this was political. Mr. COO of the CIA, Director of National Intelligence, they asking about the ODNI, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, says, have you ever interacted with any of your counterparts over at the ODNI about these kind of statements, notifying for your director or anything? Did you also occasionally reach over to them, so to speak, to let them know that this was coming down the pike? He says, I don't recall reaching over to the ODNI on any of these. Do you think that the review of this submission rose to the ODNI's COO's level due to the impact the statement could have on the 2020 election? Is that at all possible? I don't know the DNI process, says the CIA. They may have a similar process to what we did. Anything written by a former senior would rise up to the chief operating officer to inform their principals, so they may have had a similar process that we did in place. I don't know. The Hunter Biden statement garnered enough interest within the CIA that it felt compelled to flag the statements. This was a unique procedure. The decision to share this widened the circle of impact the statement had, widened the circle of people responsible, and they should have considered this before wrecking the integrity of the agency. Now, the CIA's office also informed the PCRB that it could approve the Hunter statement. They said that they had no role beyond just looking at it. However, the executive assistant sent an email saying it may notify former Director Morell that I guess it's good. You may notify former DDCIA Morell. 1 hour later, they notified Morell that he could publish it, and he did. The CIA and the PCRB completed this entire process, which included notifying top CIA officials and coordinating with the ODNI in 6 hours, man. The government moves fast when they have a political operation that they need to get done. And they needed this done for the debate. Michael M. sends this. Here's a question from PCRB staff. Dear Michael, the pre-publication classification review board completed its review of your article. Okay, so the CIA reviewed it and they signed off on it. The board determined it contains no classified info and can be published. Agency approval for publication of this material does not represent agency endorsement or verification of this work. Okay, sure. So they're just going to write, hey, we're CIA all over the place, but you don't endorse it. It can now be published. Thumbs up from the CIA. Good job. The documents and the testimony suggest that they treated this specially. They got a quick response and they complied with Morell's request that this is a rush job. They appeared to believe this was unique. They even sent it over to the DNI. In their own analytic standards, the DNI says we have to be objective here. Every individual who came in contact with the Hunter Biden statement, all the way up to Gina Haspel, had an opportunity to say this is probably not true. We were saying that it was clearly Hunter's laptop, and I've never been in the CIA. We're in the intelligence communities. I don't know how we were able to figure that out here by looking at the email headers and just matching it with his public calendar. Weird. The draft Hunter Biden statement was reviewed and passed around, and they all said, yeah, this said this, yeah, Russians. Some of the signatories were on active CIA contracts. Internal CIA documents show that several signatories, including Morell, were on active CIA contract at the time. They were earning an income supported by the American taxpayer while politicizing intelligence to rig the election in favor of Joe. Former intelligence officials interviewed repeatedly asserted that they were just a group of private citizens. We have First Amendment rights, and this is a matter of public interest. We didn't have access to classified information. We just have strong opinions. During this interview with the committees, Morell testified, I got no access to classified stuff. Are you kidding? Have you had any conversations with officials at the FBI, Michael Morell, ex-CIA? No. Had you been privy to any classified briefings about this? No. Mr. Morell, as a part of the research that you did between the contact with Mr. Blinken and the contact with Mark Polymeropoulos, did you contact any individuals as part of that research? I did not. So the sum of your research involved your internet searches. You just were on the internet, just what you did? Yes. Okay. So CIA Director Morell is on the internet and he came to a conclusion, apparently, that it was the Russians. Now, we did the same thing. That's all we had access to here. We were listening to Bob Ulinsky, looking at the leaked files, and then matching it to Hunter's calendar and other news articles about where he was as the VP's son. It matched. It was clearly his. So it's weird. I wonder maybe I should be the director of the CIA, and you should also, because you clearly see this. But the other primary drafter of the public statement, Mark, similarly said no access to classified information. John Brennan similarly did not have access to classified information. In his transcribed interview with the committee, James Clapper stated he did not seek access to any classified information when he signed the statement. Here's what Clapper said. Hey, James, well, you're the former director of national intelligence, James, who's about to make a very public statement about a very specific specific thing, you were claiming it's likely the Russians. You had the clearance on this. You could have requested a briefing on it, right? Why did you not even consider requesting a briefing on this? Well, I didn't do it because I didn't think it was appropriate. Why? Because I didn't want to be tainted by access to classified information. But why would it be tainted to try to find the truth before you signed it? He says, sorry, bad choice of words. I wanted only to go on what I had seen publicly. That's all. I didn't want any connection with the classified information in any way. Well, it confuses me why you would be willing to sign a letter like this. I mean, you had access to agencies who could have clarified it, and you didn't consider even nor make an effort to find out if what you were about to say was true or not. Well, I thought it was proper and appropriate to sound a warning that the Russians could be involved. That's all. Just a warning. Each signatory interview sought to assure the committees they had no access to classified info. But even still, the use of their official titles, their security credentials, could be read to suggest that they did by design. They said that the statement could appear more legitimate because the signatories used their intelligence titles, clearly. Yeah, they all said that they were ex-CIA. If they didn't want to use the CIA's label, they should have left that off. At the end of this statement, the 51 intelligence officials, they all use their former titles. Many of these titles are former director, former DNI, former director CIA. Questions, Mr. COO. If you're an average citizen reading this statement, do you think the titles of their former office could have boosted the legitimacies of their claims that the Russians did this? Do you think that that would appear more legitimate because of their former titles, maybe? I think that's possible, yeah. He confirmed that applying their titles, they could have leveraged their power to persuade Americans. That alone is concerning. It was done by design. Further investigations has revealed, however, that these former intelligence officials actually could have had access to this type of materials. And several of these people had active contracts with the CIA. Despite assertions that no, that they didn't have any access, one internal email said this. Wow, look at this email. From somebody to somebody, classifications unclassified. Someone says, yeah, so there's this Politico dropped the article. Remember, the article came out. 51 people. It's spread all over the place like madness. Then this person sends these emails. Probably this one, 1013 is first. This one's at 1105. So this one comes first. This guy's complaining to a colleague. He says, oh man, this frustrates me. I don't think it is helpful to the agency in the long run. Sigh, right? It's like, oh gosh. He links to the Politico article. This is not helpful. An actual person who wants the agency to do good work, not to become a bunch of partisan hacks. Then this person responds, yeah, I also love that at least a few of the random signatures here belong to individuals currently working here on contracts, ... Yeah, it's just a bunch of nice citizens who are concerned about pooty poo, interfering in our elections. Yeah, right. Even the CIA, inside the CIA, they're sending emails like, wow, we just conducted an operation here in America. Amazing. So following the review of the document, committees requested the identities of the contractors. While the CIA has not declassified the complete list who were on contract, it has told us two people were Michael Morell and David Buckley were active contractors. Morell and Buckley were earning taxpayer dollars from their work. Michael Morell and Buckley getting paid to rig the election. Beyond the access to information, it's concerning that they're on contract. Even Morell, the actual architect of this statement, acknowledged in a transcribed interview it would be inappropriate for anybody who was a contractor to be involved in the process. Mr. Morell testified before Congress that it would be inappropriate for a currently serving staff officer or contractor to be involved in the political process. Do you agree with Morell's statement? I think that's generally understood. Now, it appears that the CIA leadership never expressed any concern about the fact that he was on active contract. If you were on active contract, the PCRB, the review board, should have handled that, but there's no indication they even looked at it. They did the whole thing in 6 hours. Now, although the Hatch Act political restrictions don't apply to federal contractors like they do the CIA, they would have looked at the ethics about this to green light the statement. Now, the CIA also produced documents shedding light on conflicts of interest with the contractor status. They tell us that Buckley, like Morell, was also on active contract, but Buckley also held a green badge, which gives holders access to secure CIA facilities, and he had access at the time that Hunter Biden's statement was published. According to the CIA, Buckley was either on active contract or with green badge access to all CIA facilities until April 2022. Historically, it's only given to people who regularly employed by the CIA or are permanently assigned. In Buckley's case, this would mean he retained unfettered access to all CIA facilities through April 2022. Morell was hired back as a contractor in May 2021, was also hired back as a contractor after the publication of the statement. Just amazing. So here you go. Was he approved? Yeah, Morell, independent contractor, no fee senior advisory services, independent contractor from 5/21 to 10/21, and he's got security clearance clearances. David Buckley back here. Did he hold a security clearance on the date of the publication on 10/19? Yes, they did. High security clearance, top secret security, and those were the dates. David Buckley and Michael Morell held security clearance, and as the prior document we looked at said, he was also the active contractor here on the date of October 19, 2020. So Michael Morell, active contractor on the same date. Amazing. So it's extremely concerning that signatories of the statement were on contract at the time of the statement's drafting, review, and publication. It shows that Morell, Buckley, and likely other signatories were getting taxpayer monies to mislead Americans for Joe Biden. Our CIA rigged our own election against us. Such an overtly political action would be illegal under the law. Congress ought to consider extending this prohibition to contractors as well, because they just outsource it now. They knew that this statement was political. Morell and Polyamaropoulos, they knew that there was a political mission. Morell said this specifically. There were two intents. Why did you write this statement? One was to share our concern with the American people that the Russians were playing on this issue, the election. And two, it was to help Vice President Biden. Specifically, our goal at the CIA was to help Vice President Biden. His quote, moreover, Morell and Polyamaropoulos informed prospective signatories of the intent of the statement prior to its publication. This is why we're writing this. Writing that the statement was meant to insulate Biden from electoral vulnerabilities from his influence peddling activities that the CIA was probably involved in. Given the fact that some of the signatories were on active contract with the CIA, an organization that's not allowed to operate domestically, their efforts to score political points for Vice President Biden undermine the agency. Here is another email. Question from Michael Morell to Michael M, copying Mark P. It says, Mark and I drafted the attached because we believe the Russians were involved in some way in the Hunter Biden email issue, in some way. And because we think Trump will attack Biden on the issue at this week's debate, and we want to give the VP a talking point to use in response. This is from Michael and Mark. This is their draft. We'd be honored if each of you would be willing to join us in signing the letter. If you do agree to sign, please let me know how you'd like your affiliation to read. For those CIA officers on the BCC line, so there's a BCC here, I would like to find a way to highlight your Russia work, if appropriate. For example, Mark's citation will read, Mark P., former senior CIA operations officer, former acting chief of operations for Europe and Eurasia. If you want to agree to sign, but make that conditional on seeing who else is willing to sign, I'm happy to send you the final list, probably tomorrow, before obtaining your final approval. So if you're a little weenie, wait till you see who else is signing and then join in on the crowd, because all you basically do is just whatever your friends do, because you're just government bureaucrats with no creativity or independent thought. I will clear the statement with the publication review board at the CIA tomorrow to get Joe his talking point in time for the debate. Michael and Mark. Actual exploitation using the CIA. Please see attached. Would love to have you sign. Trying to get Dan Coates to join us. Michael, I'll gladly sign. I said this on CNN on Friday. James Clapper hates Trump. I have one suggestion. I think it would strengthen the verbiage if you would say this has all the classic earmarks of Soviet-Russian information operation rather than the feel of a Russian operation. I think that's actually a good line. Yeah, it was a good one. Michael, he says it feels like a Russian operation. He says feeling is not good. This is good. James Clapper is a bona fide CIA hack. Says no. Let's call it classic earmarks rather than feel. It's good. It's a good edit. It would have been even dumber with feel. So Michael says, yeah, and your editorial suggestion has been made. It was a good one. He's like, that's why we like you, James. So they are just editing their rigged statement, and then the statement goes out. They tell us on October 18, 2020, Morell, the key orchestrator behind the statement, who was receiving taxpayer dollars through a CIA contract, drafted an email that they sent to a group of former intelligence officials asking them to sign the statement. And we saw that. We just read through it. Then these guys noted, this frustrates me. I don't think this is helpful at all. Could you please read the contents? Yeah, this guy said it frustrates him. I don't recall this email, but why was the person frustrated? I don't know. I guess it's an interesting question. Did you have any personal frustrations, Mr. COO? You know, I think the agency's work is best done when it doesn't sort of splash across the press, but that's a general thing. And I think most CIA officers would sort of say the same thing. So I think you were asked in the last hour, is it your opinion that this statement of the 51 people was a political statement because of the investigation that followed? Was that your testimony? Well, I said I wouldn't be involved in politics, right? So that's what you're sort of getting at. I mean, it's talking about President Trump and Vice President Biden. I mean, you can't read that and say there isn't politics involved in there. And unlike other intelligence officials, McCredis said he took issue with the nature of the statement. Would you have signed this statement? He says, as I said earlier, I stay out of politics. And so for that reason, I would not have signed the statement. But the CIA approved it, signed off on it. One of the CIA employees wrote an internal email noting that it was interesting that they approved them in the first place. Wow. Wow, interesting to see what was submitted and even approved. Can't believe it. In another email, another CIA staff member described this as engaging in a pro-Biden campaign that may be disclosing classified information. So even the internal people of the CIA were grossed out. He wrote, from Fox News, the lead dissemination mechanism inside the U.S. is Senator Johnson, and there's no limit of people who will lap up Russian propaganda. It's all the Russians. Now, it's concerning enough that his talking points sought to discredit the Hunter laptop prior to the 2020 election. The COO said, now, someone trying to assist a presidential campaign, potentially using classified information from the CIA, that's kind of a bigger no-no, right? Use of classified information, regardless of the purpose, is a no-no, right? Whether it's for personal gain, political gain, that's a no-no. But the CIA lacked any safeguards, and they just approved the whole thing. So in conclusion, this insane report tells us the statement signed by the officials was interference in the electoral system in the final weeks before the election, obviously. The highest officials within the CIA were aware of the statement prior to its publications. The lead architect, the inspector general were active on contract with the CIA, raises concerns about abuse. It got expedited approval, and they requested quick decisions, and they got it. The signatories leveraged their authorities. This was poor judgment, prevented the agency from being deemed as legitimate. Now we think they're political. Now, seasoned officials were able to subvert this process, and they intended to do it to help Biden specifically. Unless and until they make serious oversight reforms, this is going to continue to be a problem. Without rigorous oversight of the intelligence community and without proper safeguards to prevent this from happening again, they are likely to continue to do this work. And as a result, we're going to continue our oversight using the authority of the federal government to do that. So absolutely ridiculous that we have three major revelations here. CIA paid the people who wrote the letters. The CIA housed the people who signed the letters, and the CIA approved the letter that ultimately went out. All three items done by the CIA, our own government. And the Hunter Biden laptop was real. It was true. All legitimate. We talked about it. Basically, no evidence that it came from Russia at all. They just made it up. And they even had little draft sessions to make it even more propagandistic for us all. And they shoved it down our throats, and they stole an election as a result. So that is now on the record in writing. This guy was also someone who signed the letter, and his name is Jeremy Bash. Used to be married to Dana Bash, who is now moderating the second debate. Dana, not Jeremy. But here is what he was saying before he signed the letter.
This looks like Russian intelligence. This walks like Russian intelligence. This talks like Russian intelligence. This effort by Rudy Giuliani and the New York Post and Steve Bannon to cook up supposed dirt on Joe Biden looks like a classic Russian playbook disinformation campaign. That assessment, by the way, is not my assessment. That's the assessment of the Trump intelligence community leadership, who in August of this year put out a statement saying that Andrei Durkash and Russian intelligence were trying to denigrate Joe Biden. And then the next month in September, Steve Mnuchin at the Treasury Department put out a statement saying that Durkash is a known Russian intelligence operative and has been for the last decade. So when the intelligence community goes in and warns Donald Trump that Rudy Giuliani is being worked over by Russian intelligence, and then Rudy Giuliani suddenly comes forward with these mysteriously created emails, probably hacked through a Russian intelligence operation, we have to acknowledge the fact that the President of the United States is supporting, is condoning, is welcoming a Russian intelligence operation in 2020. Nicole, this is collusion in plain sight. We don't need a special counsel. We don't need congressional investigations. The President is acknowledging it and welcoming it with open arms.
Absolutely insane. This was clipped over from Clip Keeper, who put together a very nice clip there for us, and absolutely wild to have him look into the camera and lie to the people in order to help Joe Biden. These people have basically no souls. Probably why he had to marry Dana Bash. Anyway, very curious what that guy is doing out there. Talk about collusion. He colluded with 50 other people to sign a letter that resulted in a rigged election. Now, here are some of the people who are investigating this, explaining. This is Mike Turner walking us through a little bit more about this.
Absolutely. Well, the House Intelligence Committee got these emails that showed that the manner in which this was presented, and that we now know from depositions that Jim's committee and my committee held, that these individuals openly were talking about doing this letter solely to help Biden in his debate. Now, what that means is we now all know that we saw Biden stand there in the middle of his debate and lie to the American public, because he knew, of course, it wasn't Russian disinformation. When he said, I have a letter that says this is Russian disinformation, there's nothing to this, Biden was lying to the American public. But also, everyone who signed that letter, IC-51 as they're called, they were lying. On depositions, they, one after the other would acknowledge they didn't even try to verify it. They knew what they were doing. This was totally political, totally for the debates, and they were lies.
And it was concocted by our own CIA CIA, approved by them in the biggest political operation in maybe American history to rig an election to steal the presidency. They've done it, and we're glad that there is some exposure now happening. We'll see if there will be any repercussions happening for these people who created a conspiracy to rig and deprive us of our rights to have a free and fair election. We'll see if Trump wins and his DOJ comes in, if they'll do anything about it. We sure hope that they do, because this was a conspiracy and it was something that was organized and engineered for a political purpose. Can't stand in America. So we'll continue to cover it, my friends. We hope you join us as we do. Thank you for subscribing wherever it is you're watching this. Thanks for liking our channel, and thanks for inviting someone you know to come over and join us so they can also see how disgusting and corrupt our government is. We'll look forward to seeing you back here, and we have another great video coming up next about the J6 committee and exactly how illegitimate they are, because the House of Representatives just went through a small vote, and it's a good one. We'll talk about that in the next segment. We'll see you over there and back here on the next one.